Best UFC fights to watch as a new fight fan. Listen, these are opinionated. Also, if I am missing any fights, please drop them in the comments below. Appreciate y'all. Alexander Volkanovski versus Islam Makhachev. There are levels to MMA, and this is one of the highest levels of mixed martial arts that you may ever see. Guys, go watch this fight right now if you've never seen it. If you've never watched it, are you even a fight fan? Are you even a fight fan if you've never seen this fight? Come on. Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje. Now, I know a lot of people will say, oh, well, this was a one-sided affair by Max Holloway and, you know, this and that. Dude, this was the performance of a lifetime by Max Holloway. This was a beatdown of Justin Gaethje. And then to finish it off, Max Holloway gives us a cherry on top with the KO. Bro, if you have not watched this, go watch this fight right now. Now that I'm thinking about it, if you haven't watched this fight, you either got to be a really, really new fan or you just, like, are not hip, because how in the world do you miss UFC 300? Khamzat Chimaev versus Gilbert Burns. This was the fight where we found out Khamzat Chimaev was human. Okay, Gilbert Burns gave him a war. Absolute banger, absolute slugfest. I mean, you had a little bit of everything in this fight. And these guys went ham. Khamzat Chimaev and Gilbert Burns, if you have not seen this fight, go watch this fight right now. Seriously. Daniel Zellhuber versus Esteban Ribovic. Guys, this was a banger fight. I mean, we almost saw a knockout at least 16 or 17 times in this fight. Like, there were so many instances where these guys just would not go down. So I definitely recommend watching this fight. Absolute cinema on the feet, bro. The absolute brawl. Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker. Man, this was the fight, I believe. I mean, in general, people hated Dustin Poirier, but this fight right here, when he went up to Dan Hooker afterwards, after beating him, and it, by the way, absolute brawl, slugfest. This fight is amazing too. Go watch this if you have not. Usually Dan Hooker and Dustin Poirier, whenever these guys fight, it's a banger, but combine, put them two in an octagon together, and you're asking for a cinema. But yeah, this was the fight where Dustin went up to Dan Hooker after, and he's like, "Don't count your chickens" or something. He said something about chickens, and then, you know, that's when the clip surfaced and everyone just started, like, hating Dustin even more. But yeah, absolute cinema, bro. Go watch this fight too. It's absolute violence. Yuri Prochazka versus Glover Teixeira. Need I say more? Yuri Prochazka always brings it, but this fight, I mean, he was not even supposed to win this fight, and then Yuri just rallied back. Absolute phenomenal fight. Go watch this. If you're a Yuri fan and you haven't seen this fight, what are you even doing? I may get some slack for throwing this fight in there, but Sean O'Malley versus Chris Moutinho, or Moutinho, however you say it. Bro, this was one of those, like, on top of the world performances by Sean O'Malley. I mean, this dude was, like, air bouncing a basketball in between his legs while piecing up Chris, and then, like, no looking away. Like, O'Malley was on a different level during this fight. You know, it was very one-sided, but nonetheless, it is still very fun to watch. And Chris was like an actual zombie in this fight. Like, this fight probably took a few years off of his career. I'm not even going to lie to you. This fight was bad for Chris, but Sean O'Malley, absolute MVP performance, bro. Well. We all know the story with this one. John Jones versus Dominic Reyes. If you sit here and tell me that this fight isn't in your list of top fights, you're crazy, bro. You are crazy. Dominic Reyes brought John Jones everything he had. And, you know, a lot of people argue that Dominic Reyes won this fight. Yeah, it was close. You know, sometimes I watch it and I'm like, well, you know, I could see John. And then other times I'm like, yeah, Dominic Reyes won this fight, bro. It's an absolute beautiful fight. It's unfortunate because Dominic Reyes really went downhill after this, and obviously John Jones, you know, kept flourishing in his career, you know, after moving to heavyweight and whatnot. But it was a tough situation, man, because like I said, you could have argued it either way, and nonetheless, I mean, it doesn't take anything away from this fight being at the top of the list. Check out John Jones versus Dominic Reyes if you have not watched that already. Yoel Romero versus Paulo Costa. The amount of times you're going to jump out of whatever you're sitting in or laying in during this fight is insane. It's an absolute cinema. It's a little bit sloppy at times, but that is what literally makes this fight beautiful, bro. Yoel Romero versus Paulo Costa. Go check this fight out ASAP too, bro. Do Ho Choi and Cub Swanson. Listen, I was not a big fan of the UFC back in, I think this fight took place in 2015, if I'm not mistaken, or 2014. I was not honestly even hip to UFC at that point, okay? But every time I watch this fight, there's something that just like, it almost feels like I'm reliving the fight just while it's happening, bro. And it's an absolute beautiful cinema. Go watch this fight. If you have not seen Doo Ho Choi versus Cub Swanson, go watch this fight. Very underrated. I think it was fight of the year, the year it happened, obviously, but I mean, I never see people talking about this fight, and it's one of the greatest fights that I've ever seen. There are hundreds of fights out there. You know, phenomenal fights of the year. You know what I mean? Maybe didn't crack like the top 5, top 10 spot, but nonetheless, I mean, phenomenal fights regardless. Some honorable mentions for me specifically: Brandon Royval versus Tatsuro Taira, Kamaru Usman versus Hamza Chimaev, Robbie Lawler versus Rory McDonald. You cannot have a top list without Robbie Lawler and Rory McDonald in there, bro. Specifically, the second fight. TJ Dillashaw and Renan Barão, to this day, is still one of my all-time favorite fights. That was one of the first fights that I actually, because I didn't watch UFC back around that time, so that was one of the first fights that I actually rewatched as like an old fight. You know what I mean? When I started rewatching fights, Renan Barão and TJ Dillashaw was one of the first fights that I remember watching, and I've rewatched this fight at least 4 or 5 times, bro. Phenomenal fight. Demetrius Johnson versus Henry Cejudo 2. Robert Whittaker and Yoel Romero. And you know I had to throw in a WMMA fight in there. Zhang Wei Li versus Joanna. Listen, guys, that is the list. Those are the fights. Go check them out. If you have not seen some of these, or if you have not seen all of them for some crazy reason, go check out each one of these fights. Go look. I urge you to watch all of these fights before the next pay-per-view, which is this upcoming Saturday, just so you have a good foundation for MMA. Honestly, the upcoming card isn't really that crazy, so you don't really have to rush through all of these fights. But eventually watch each of these fights, bro, because they're absolute bangers. Okay? Guys, if you enjoyed the video, drop a like. Make sure to subscribe. And in the comments, let me know, what is the top 5 fights on your list? And if there are any fights that I'm forgetting, bro, reach out in the comments and drop them below. Don't gatekeep, my guy. Don't gatekeep from the newbies. We need to get the newbies hip. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoy. Deuces.